For this delay, but I think we are all set now. And welcome to the first ANAMED event of this fall, and thank you for being with us together. So today we are here to learn more about the recent publication by Swedish Research Institute, a volume on how Byzantines and moderns thought about the stylite monks of Syrian regions. So the volume, Syrian Stylites, Rereadings and Recastings of Late Ancient Superheroes, is co-edited by Barbara Crostini here with us, and Christian Høgel, and he is with us too, but virtually. We'll see him soon. And actually this volume is a product of a earlier previous conference again organized by Swedish Research Institute. So today we'll hear Barbara Crostini, Christian Høgel, virtually, Robert Nelson, and Olof Heilo, and some of the contributors of the volume will also join us virtually. So please let me introduce briefly our speakers here. So Barbara Crostini is a lecturer in ecclesiastical history, art history, and cultural studies at the Newman Institute, Uppsala, Sweden, and adjunct professor in Greek at the Department of Linguistics and Philology, Uppsala University again. And Christian Høgel is professor in ancient and Byzantine Greek, Latin, and modern Greek in the Center for Languages and Literature at Lund University. Robert S. Nelson, who might not need an introduction for Turkish audience, but he is an emeritus professor of the history of arts at Yale University. He taught mainly medieval art in the Eastern Mediterranean and the history and methods of art history. And finally, Olof Heilo, even more familiar name for Istanbul audience. He has PhD in Byzantine studies from University of Vienna, and he has been first the deputy director and currently the director of Swedish Research Institute in Istanbul. So before I leave the floor to our amazing cast today, so let me tell you about the context of this panel in which it is conceived. So as you can see, it's a collaboration between ANAMED and Swedish Research Institute, but in addition, it is planned as an opening event for a fascinating conference convened by Demet Karabulut Dede, Christos Hagiannis, and Benjamin Coleman. The conference title is Looking for Byzantium, Modernism and the Byzantine Cultures, and it will start tomorrow and continues to Saturday, and it will take place at Istanbul Bilgi University's Central Campus. So you can check their program, the conference program, at either ANAMED's website or Bilgi University's website. So once again, thank you for joining us today, and I'm leaving the floor to Olof.
And I'm also saying welcome from the side of the Swedish Research Institute. My role here is very brief. I'm going to, in short, do you hear me? Yes, I'm going to leave the floor in short to Barbara and Robert. I'm here basically on the side of the publishers. The Swedish Research Institute, which I think most of you might know. We are basically infrastructure for Nordic scholars in Istanbul. We arrange events, we host workshops, and we also do publish books now and then. We are not a big publishing house, so it means also that we have a mainly rather modest pace of editing, but I'm really happy, I can say, with the latest issue in our series, Transactions. I should thank especially my partner in crime, my deputy director, Anders Ackfeldt here, because he has been doing a lot of work on this volume. I have also working on it, and for me it has been a double pleasure because the origins of this volume goes back 5 years when I was deputy director and Barbara arranged a workshop on Stylites, which had a slightly different title, I think, but Barbara can remind me about that in short. So it's been a few years, lots of things are happening in between, from pandemics to political tensions, but I'm very glad to see that the stylites have kind of been like a stable axis throughout this period, and that finally we could greet this very wonderful end result. There is just a few words also on the whole arrangement here. As Emre said, we're really happy also to co-host this with ANAMED. We're also very happy that this could be integrated in the conference on Byzantine modernism, which we are also co-hosting. We have not prepared any refreshments, but after the presentation is over, so in about 45 minutes or so, we will simply welcome everyone to join us at James Joyce pub and in a very Irish way celebrate the stylites. So with that, I leave the floor to Barbara first.
Thank you, Olof. Sounds good with the Irish celebration afterwards. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of this conference on Byzantium and modernism for giving us this opportunity of presenting the book. And thank you all for coming here tonight. And our book is about how stylites, like modern superheroes, shifted the boundaries of the possible by capturing communal longings. I think this theme is therefore particularly fitting to the conference that you're about to have, as it draws a continuum between ancient and modern discourses. And the aim of this presentation is just to give you a small taste of the book, and I will begin with a brief outline of the background to the project, and you've heard already a little bit about that, and the genesis of the volume, and then discuss some salient features of its contribution to the study of stylites. And these were weird ascetics who lived on pillars exposed to the natural elements and to people's gaze. And here you see the cover of the book, in the elegant transaction series of the Swedish Research Institute in Istanbul. And it was the previous slide. And I thank Olof Heilo and his collaborators for providing, but Olof provided the picture of Simeon the Elder's sanctuary at Kalatsiman, and this is the stump of his pillar that you see in the center of the courtyard. And Simeon's precinct was called a mandra, which really means a sheepfold. And our book is entitled Syrian Stylites. Oops, now this is meant to be the other one. Rereadings and Recastings of Late Ancient Superheroes. And my co-editor was Christian Høgel, who is joining us online from Lund. And I thank him also for contributing to the volume and providing all the support in the process of editing these papers. And we will have another presentation also of the book in Lund in case people are in Sweden then. And the book is available both in print and also for free download. Yes, you have the URL there from the SRII website, and it's a 26th volume of the series, and there are also other volumes in the series that you can download, so I encourage you to visit that page. Most of the papers were read exactly 5 years ago to the day, and this was just a coincidence really, but you can see my slide for that occasion here, and so the title was The Reception of Stylites. Sorry, I don't know if you hear me. Yeah. And it was sponsored by RJ, which is the Bank of Sweden Fund for Research in the Humanities. As Olof said, it was the COVID pandemic that really slowed us down in preparing the publication, but it's really wonderful to be here today in person and to be back in Istanbul. So both Ingela Nilsson and Olof Heilo graciously hosted this 2-day event that we had in 2019 and worked hard. We worked hard, and we also visited Annapolis, where Constantinople exhibited its very own stylite, Daniel. And Olof also added a basket there to the program with a concern for feeding both stylites and us conference participants, and it was a great fun event. So in my introduction to the book, I exploit a leitmotif, which is this question, where did you meet your first stylite? And you may use that as your icebreaker in the next party, see how it goes. And the question mirrors a little bit my journey of discovery of stylites, and it also highlights the different ways in which a modern audience can become aware of this strange ascetic model of the standing man on a pillar. And I remember listening to some professors sort of making comments about stylites, and it was in 1993. I was just starting my master's, and the occasion was this big conference in Oxford called Constantinople and its hinterland, and it was no less than Cyril Mango saying to Gilbert Dagron that really these people were madmen, and that, you know, a historian didn't really have much use for this kind of thing. And I was a little shocked, I must say. But after that, I think it stayed with me as a kind of, you know, reason not to look at stylites. I didn't want to get myself into trouble. Until in Paris, I entered an exhibition curated by Raphaël Ziadé at the Institut du Monde Arabe, and this was years after, almost, I think, 2018 or when was this? 2018, yeah. And so standing before the stele of Gibrin that was put from the Louvre into this exhibition, I overheard this woman saying, you know, in Syria, stylites are really more important than Christ. And she was kind of telling this to a friend, and I was really struck by that. And I thought, well, you know, I need to do something about stylites. And I was having lunch with Ingela that day, and that's how it all began, really, this project. And our highlight of our conference was watching Buñuel's movie, which inspired each and all of us, although some people were a bit skeptical, I must say, to deal seriously but creatively with the madness at hand. So through Buñuel's movie, stylite feats became a part of the cultural discourse of even the agnostic 20th century. Buñuel's 1965 film was also echoed in a couple of Italian movies, where apparitions of stylites in semi-farcical, though not entirely desecrating mode, contributed to revive the memory of this odd form of asceticism. And one of them is called Il Papocchio, which was a Catholic satire, and it has a hilarious scene of an innocent young man listening in fascination to the story of Simeon from the voice of a church explanatory recording, which was activated by his coins. I don't know if any of you remember this kind of device. And as he keeps slotting coins in to listen to the voice that comes from this statue, and it repeats the narrative over and over again, and he just looks sort of open-mouthed. And suddenly the same statue comes alive, and Simeon, the statue, is amazed by this unusual interest of this young man, and says, well, I'll give you my blessing, you know, you're kind of odd, but, you know, I'll give you my blessing. And then the young man sort of runs out of the church carrying the statue on his shoulders. It was like a furta sacra of sorts. Anyway, so there's a lot of echoes of Buñuel's movie that must have got to a wider public. And of course, stylites were very popular in Byzantium, as you all know. And here, just an example of the most famous, perhaps, in the imagery and the Menologion of Basil II. And I think possibly even Byzantinists learn about stylites first through images, and then perhaps they get to their texts. Men on pillars are at once an ascetic form and a monument, and the incongruous labeling of a saint's bust on a pillar as Saint Sylvester in an 11th century Greek psalter prompted me to think that in some cases their representations really reference cultic activity to images in the form of busts of saints on pillars, instead of understanding these as feetless saints, in the memorable words in which Virginia Burroughs describes them, and therefore as historical depictions, I think it's the cultic life around their memories that the images set out to portray. I think this is evident in the shrine-like constructions of the marginal psalters that you see here, and also the cultic point of view explains this really weird example in a church at Akstala in northern Armenia, where St. Benedict, the Western saint, Latin saint, is depicted as a stylite. And I think these kind of representations have their own cultic logic that go beyond the idea of representing simply the characteristics of a historical saint's asceticism. So the book we edited is interdisciplinary, not because our approach is interdisciplinary, but because late antique and Byzantine culture was relentlessly intermedial, fomenting debate between texts and the performance arts, words and image, and the written and oral performative modes of communication. And here are 3 sections, therefore textual, visual, and a poetic section in the form of an anthology. And so the first section has 7 contributions, and 3 articles are dedicated to Simeon the Elder: Vestergren on Theodoret's account, Crostini on the Greek life by Antonios, and Franco and Conca on poetic rewritings by Tennyson, Nencioni, and Cavafis. Vestergren, Cooper, and Crostini all deal with a new interpretation of ancient texts, and I'm not sure if Cooper is online, but hopefully he can speak more about his first critical study of the life of Theodolos. Aronson, Høgel, Casoan, Messis, and Franco and Conca all deal with the interaction of stylite texts with later rewritings, whether medieval or modern. Dendrite hagiography, the metaphastic compilations, Middle Byzantine novellistic hagiography, and modern poetry. And the conference also had an eco-critical stylite streak with Aronson's essay in the volume. In part 2, we have 6 contributions dealing with the visual aspects. August, Hamarne, and Mena provide a historical perspective on the stylite phenomenon, contextualizing it within Roman statuary programs, Middle Eastern architectures, and the Cappadocian landscape. And Hamarne's archaeological survey reports, for example, latrine facilities in these tower-like constructions from Jordan, making the idealized pillar into something more real and concrete and livable. Apostolo, Veronese, and Amadou push forward in time, daringly bringing modern arts, cinema, and theatrical performance in conversation with the stylite feats. Apostolo's immaterial plastic columns derail classical solidity, like the Christian ascetics subverted Roman monuments, and Veronese reminds us that Buñuel's story is about a Simeon and not the Simeon, in order not to offend piety, a detail that is easily overlooked even while adhering to ancient narrative moments. Except, of course, at the very end, when Simeon relocates in the Big Apple by jet plane, and stylites are performative saints. They place themselves on purpose on a public stage, inviting comment, disbelief, interaction, though at the same time keeping a distance on a column that inculcated wonder and awe and that still provokes a sense of respect, despite natural suspicion raised by their oddity. The provocation, and this is like a show in a museum by Marina Abramovic, or the studied madness of Dada performances, which Amadou talks about, that provocation is intended. Finally, I curated, with much help from translators and typesetters, whom I thank for a wonderful job, a short anthology of texts and images on stylites. Poems include Tennyson's full text, Varnalis, Rilke, Ashton Smith, and the Polish poet Stanislaw Grochowiak. And I will end with these images, the famous Sinai as Annunciation icon with a row of saints on pillars below the scene of Mary and the angel, its crowdedness and opulence contrasting the sparse setting of Robert Morris's 1961 standing performance of A Man in a Box, a kind of framed ascete brought back to the ground. And I enjoyed interacting with everyone who contributed to the making of this book, and I would like to end by sincerely thanking them for enriching me with this process. And I hope that the result will also enrich others who read it and use it. And thank you for your attention today.
And I will simply give the word further to Robert.
Thank you very much to the organizers, and especially to Barbara, my friend, who lured me into playing this role as a discussant of the volume. I have to say, in my defense, I got the volume earlier this week, and then I spent a whole day flying here from America, so I haven't had time for deep reflection. I had begun my response by recounting the two parts of the book and with words about the separate articles, etc. But Barbara's just done that. So I'm going to skip that, which might be useful for to move along. And another thing that happened to me this week, as I was reading the book, I read an obituary in the New York Times of a man by the name of Thomas Meiji. Does anybody perhaps ever heard of him? I don't think so. I hadn't heard of him either. He's a very curious American, and I'll tell you a bit about his work as a way of continuing the volume's discussion of connecting Stylite saints with today and with our world. That, I think, is the remarkable contribution of this volume. Of course, it's state-of-the-art Byzantine studies for the various texts about the Stylites and the various cults, etc. I take that for granted, given the people on either side of me. But what I found most remarkable about the book was the several essays that connect Stylites with the present day. That makes this book not the standard book in Byzantine studies, which always keeps the subject way back there in time in a very distant place, but instead brings Byzantine studies to the present for the benefit of us, that is, people living now, and also for the discipline of Byzantine studies. Let me pick up my text then with a performance that took place, that took place at the Museum of Modern Art. This performance is mentioned in one of the articles. Get the person's name here.
Christine Amadou.
Amadou, yes. Very interesting article, I thought, because this performance, the title is "The Artist is Present." She connects with the presence of the stylite on top of his column. He was at one point distant. On the other hand, people climbed up ladders to the person, and there was a direct engagement with the saint. Marina Abramovitz, a noted performance artist, staged this performance at the Museum of Modern Art in 2010. She's the lady on the right with the red dress sitting. And she would sit there for like all the time the museum is open and invites visitors, spectators, the audience at a museum, to come and occupy the chair at the left. No words were exchanged. They simply looked at each other as long as the spectator could stand it, frankly. She maintained that pose for hours. And so it's very much about an essay about the physical presence of stylites in their world. But I was fascinated by the cover of the book, and we thank the director for the photograph. This is of Kalat Zaman, a site in Syria, where Syrian Stylites had his pillar. All that remains of it is this stone here that you see. It's in the center of a polygonal structure. Let's see, of course I have a slide. Which you see, this is a view from Google Earth. It's a bit blurred perhaps, but you can see in the center of these four basilicas, the one down there, is a polygon, octagon I believe, with the pillar in the center. This was the place that thousands of pilgrims came to pay homage to Simeon while he was alive and after his death. There's a remarkably similar project by this artist I'm mentioning, James Meiji. I think I called him Thomas. He's James. He died last month. The obituary, though, was just a few days ago in the New York Times. Quite an interesting person. He never had any training as an artist, never had any training in art history, went to law school at a well-known law school in the States, became a lawyer, worked briefly for the city of New York and then for the UN on legal affairs. And then he had a change of life and became a cab driver for a while in Boston. And then he spent various other times doing jobs around the world. He was for a while a worker in the oil fields of West Texas. That's where America gets most of its petroleum from. And these people that are on the wells, and they manage all of the machinery and the pipe that's going down to drill the well that eventually will bring up the oil. This is a very rough and dirty job, and he did that for a while. Along the way, he learned how to weld, and being in West Texas, he discovered this interesting site that you see, and he gradually bought up lands of the desert. And in the center of his large plot of land, he erects this cruciform structure, which you see from the air. There are 4 pavilions on the 4 sides here, and they're connected by a walkway in between. This is a hill, hence the name of this thing called The Hill. And behind his picture, you see columns, and there are 45 columns built all around the site. These columns are composed of stones that he finds there, and then he holds them together with some kind of metal scaffolding. And now we're looking at the site, and we can see the 4 pavilions here. Each of the pavilions has massive steel doors on each side. There's been one exhibition catalog about him. This is a photograph from that catalog. And my purpose in showing it is to show him again, but also the way in which when you open the doors on both sides, you can see straight through to the other pavilion. Some of the pavilions have within them triptych-like works of art, I'll call them, 3 parts, and with various metal objects that he found and welded these into the frame. This particular, I'll call it an altarpiece, stands on a stepped platform, all very similar to the kinds of platforms you would see for altars and the side altars of Italian churches. So what does this have to do with the stylites? At Qalat Saman in Syria, Simeon and his column were in the center. And as we know from the volume that devotes great interest to the presence of the living saint there, he must have had, it must have been quite a scene there when thousands of pilgrims come. Today it's a ruin. Simeon's long gone, and even his stone, his pillar, not much of it is left. It is an absence at the heart of Qalat Saman. Now what Meiji makes is a different kind of absence. At the center of his complex is a void. There's nothing. It's the opposite, therefore, of what they were attempting to do at Qalat Saman, and it's the opposite of what Abramovitz was doing and her evocative performance of presence in the Museum of Modern Art. So I share this with you today to show you another work of art, so to speak, of columns. The final difference between the two sites is that almost nobody in the world has been to this place. It's estimated only a few hundred people have ever been allowed to go there. It's not open to the public, and while he was alive, he had to take you there. It's a couple hours from the city of El Paso, so it was a big production to go there. Now that he's dead, I don't know if anybody goes there ever again at all. Again, the notion of death and absence, which is suggested by some of the provocative articles in this wonderful volume published by the Swedish Institute. Thank you very much.
And now we are connecting Christian, aren't we, online? Yes. Can just briefly say that I was happy. This is a picture I took in 2005 when I visited the Basilica of St. Simeon, and we were discussing a lot by the end, because stylites were kind of inconvenient for our cover template, because however you did, the headline would end up on them. And then I was very happy to suddenly realize that, oh, I actually have this picture, which would fit very well. Good. Here we have Christian.
Yes, I'm here. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. So happy to be with you, although unfortunately only online. But so happy to hear you all, and thanks for the presentations. And I'll be adding a bit to what Barbara said. But I'm really happy that you are doing the presentation, Barbara. You really deserve the main attention, and also wrote the wonderful foreword to our introduction to the book, to the volume. So thank you very much for the collaboration. It's been really a pleasure. And of course, thank you to all contributors and to the organizers of this. This is really wonderful. I'm not with you, and I don't know how much I can contribute, so I'll just add a few things. I had an image I would want to put up. I'm not sure if I can share the screen. I mean, it's the, of course, yes, let's see, am I able to do this? So it's just the image we saw also before. But how is it now? Am I seeing? Yes, I was just thinking of adding. My contribution was in the section of taking very much the story further in time, and I thought there was some general things one could pick up on this. on the question of what stylites are and how they have been perceived, which of course connects to how they were perceived by the contemporary people. But still, I think there is some things one could take, especially perhaps in, well, say, the Middle Ages, about what they look like. And it connects also to my own presentation, but perhaps especially also to Høgel's presentation, who is also with us, I believe, online. So the question of what this person or this kind of person would look like and be, what kind of, I would call it provocative and then also intriguing questions would arise by seeing them or hearing of them, and as Barbara said, very often seeing them by seeing the pictures of them. And here is again the image from the Menologion of Basil II, so from around 1000, year 1000, and of course in a most wonderful presentation within a whole range of images of saints. And this, the image of Simeon calls to both the way it's presented, but also how it's placed, calls to mind certain things that happened with Simeon in the time afterwards. I've always been, ever since I sort of really started looking at this image, I've been really fascinated by the way it is presented as some kind of mediating image of a saint who can make the suppose the things to the right that would be the we could call it the more representing, we could say, the statehood in which he lived, I believe, communicate with those from the outside, I believe, because the people to the left are, at least if we go by the life written by Theodoret, the people who came to him from the outside. Theodoret is very proud to announce that Arabs, Persians, Georgians, all sorts of people living outside the Roman Empire, and that is the thing he's connecting, also were attracted to Simeon, and they came and they praised him, and they were converted in great numbers. But as you see, it's a proskynesis, of course, the man is doing at the bottom of the pillar, but it does call to attention the question of how far is this adoration then? Is this somehow critically questioning what kind of status a saint should have? Not only is there the prostration in front of the saint, but there's also the elevation, and so what does this all add up to? Which becomes a problem in the lives, and they never really, none of the contemporary texts really sort of explain why did he need to go all the way up to the top of a pillar. So there's this questioning of the religious status, we could call it, which I think this text, this image at least, has no difficulties in making obvious to us when we see it. Then there's the question of the imperialness. Of course, this is the Menologion of Basil II, so he is included, but also together with so many other saints, of course, into an imperial sphere. But there's more imperialness to Simeon, I believe. I mean, there's and that perhaps we'll talk about the question of the pillar as a remnant or a replication of secular representations of emperors. But there's also the question of, as I said, the way Theodor presents him as a figure that will then connect empires or connect at least states in the world. of course with a visionary aspect also in it, but also I would call it a secular potential for being an ambassador, you could say, or a mediating person. And then, of course, there's the very coincidence, I believe, even though it's hard to, when you look at the sources and the way it happens, that his feast day on the, second, first, or how is it, of September, ends up becoming the, it then coincides very closely with the indiction calendar, so the secular, you could say, tax calendar of, which is then not quite settled at 1st of September in antiquity or late antiquity, but then at some point it becomes settled. It's the 1st of September. And the church year also sort of has different starting points, 15th of August and so on, before it settles also on the 1st of September. And in that way, Simeon, by these three different, you could say, calendars being coordinated, ends up being the marker of the beginning of the church year, and also the indictions of the secular. But at least, so he is the first saint represented in the Menologion of Basil II, and he is the first saint in so many collections and lists and calendars and all sorts of things. He will then become sort of what I would call then iconic, in the sense, of course, of the very image, as we see it also here, the common image of a man with no lower part, or the lower part has become a part of the pillar, but also iconic in the sense of he is the one who sort of signals the beginning of these various calendars or time frames. So I think there's something very strong there, which is already present in the early material, but is then recast and comes back even stronger further on. So this was also a bit adding about my my contribution to the book, which is on Simeon Metaphrastus. That's almost at the same time, just a few decades earlier. Also rewriting the life, also making it further clear that the imperialness is important for this figure. He's of course not the only stylite, and not the only stylite in the Menologion of Basil II or in Simeon's Menologion, but he's definitely the one who catches most of the attention from the beginning and all the way through. So these were just some reflections on the material. I really hope you all get a chance to have a look at the book. I mean, it's especially that's again Barbara's contribution very much, putting together also the end section with all the images and modern or later text and reflections on the stylites. It's I know it's wrong by a co-editor to thank the other editor, but I have to. But thank you for your attention. What's hearing the rest?
Thank you, Christian. I think we need to wrap up. There should be some time for questions, but I'm taking the opportunity. Emery, are there any of the other authors online, if they just want to nip in and say hi?
Sam is actually trying to join right now, but he's not online yet. So maybe
We can leave the floor to questions in the meantime, because we have both editors here also. So. I mean, if there, it's a very wide topic, so I can start actually asking Barbara and Christian. I think Christian can hear me also. It's such a vast topic, and I think also during the course of as the book was being produced, you kept also discovering new things all the time. There were, I mean, for that anthology, by the end there were images that turned up, like this Dutch surrealist painting, for instance, and I think I sent you at some point even this. There is a clip with this British comedic Mitchell and Webb where they are parodying stylites. Do you feel that there is anything still that, despite the wide range that you have covered, that you still think you have a feeling this might need more thorough studies? Is there kind of any time period which needs to be more explored in the sense of how people have been, with the reception of stylites?
What a good question. I mean, in a way, in the end, it wasn't as systematic, or it didn't aim to be comprehensive. So I'm sure there's lots more there that can be explored and on these lines. And also, in a way, we kind of broaden the idea. We're not looking for somebody standing on a pillar. Although this David Blaines, yeah. Yes, yeah, that was, yeah. And I thought you were going to mention your favorite, the one you told me about in the Domkyrka somewhere.
Also good for you to know it. There is a possibility for anyone who likes to practice stylitism. So there is actually in the main church in the city of Linz in Austria since a few years, you can rent the tower chamber, which is like completely isolated, and sit there for 3 months. And apparently it's very popular because they've had to put people on a queue to get admission there.
And you can blog from there, and yeah, so you know our world is open to many different things, which is good. So yes, we can, and now we also have cruciform pillars in some way. So yeah, there are different ways of seeing this, and I hope maybe that the book lays down some traces that people can pick up and develop.
Christian, do you have something you would like to add here?
Well, no, not that much. I totally agree with what Barbara said, and I think that one needs, I think, very much to look into the sort of spatial distribution of stylites in the period. It is so interesting, the question about countryside, proximity to cities, even in cities and so on, that kind of study. I think that can be explored very much further, and of course there's the whole question of copying. I mean that they copy each other in a sense that goes even into copying, perhaps even fictitious. I mean the models into other stories, into other texts and so on. So there's a lot to be done. That's for sure. I remember Barbara bringing up the list. I think it's Delahaye's old list of all the known stylites, and it's a very long list. Of course, many of them we know very little about, but still, this whole sort of mapping of this could definitely bring us to new understanding of the whole phenomenon.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there are no questions, we will wrap it. Oh, yeah, please.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to look into this book. I just have a pretty basic question. I noticed that you split it into text and image. One section text, one section image, and I'm wondering if you can speak to the overlaps that possibly exist, or just the decision to do that, and where you can see kind of text and image coming together, especially in the manuscript tradition. Obviously, it's something I think of first, but if there are any other examples, and kind of, why you made the decision, where we can see overlaps.
Christian, would you like to start?
Yeah, that's a good question. I remember our discussions. I'm not sure I remember our sort of firm arguments about why to do it that way, but it definitely had it made it tie in we thought a neat way, I think, to the modern representations. I think that's part of the reason, and of course I mean, in any sort of search for the historical truth, you would obviously connect things. So there's absolutely there shouldn't be a need to make the division. But I think it worked in the sense of having the modern things then become the modern pictorial representations becoming clearer to form a line. Am I right, Barbara?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, in a way, it was to give the visual its own. And in the third part, I think there is more of a conversation between these poems and the images that are juxtaposed to them. So that's where they sort of come together, but in this more kind of evocative way, rather than yes, I want to get away from the idea that images illustrate text or somehow translate text into a visual form, that they have their own kind of message and their own kind of life. And I think in that sense we divided them also just because of the contents, of course, of the authors involved. But I think I'd like it to give that impression more than the fact that they are sort of two separate things. Of course, they're not in a way, but they're not. Yeah, we really should have put the images first, I think. But thank you for the question.
I mean, I can add, of course, that I think it's very nice in the third part exactly that there is a kind of a dialogue between, even if they are not related. There is one of the illustrations of Tennyson's poem, which is actually taken from one of the early editions, but the other images are not exactly related to the text, and still there is a kind of a dialogue between image and text. And of course, in the last part, there are some icons, there are some Byzantine manuscripts, but apart from that, the texts are all from 19th and 20th centuries. So I think also in that sense, this was one reason why we suggested that this book would be a good kind of an overture to the next 2 days of discussions about Byzantium in modern art and literature. So which I'm really looking forward also to listen to. So yeah, Emir.
I have a question too. Sorry. So I am really interested in the modern reception. So my question is, if we see any merging of or distinction between these stylite types and holy fools, if they are somehow taught together in the modern reception, do we see any examples of that, or can we distinguish those? Distinguish them. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously a relationship between these kind of mad ways of impersonating and living the spiritual dimension, and the performative way. I think kind of makes them similar in many ways. I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any brilliant thought about how that is related in modern examples, but maybe somebody else does. Do you, Robert? Or no? But we need to think about that. I think that would be a good line of inquiry. Yeah. Yes, Christian.
Any comment from you, Christian?
No, not really. Thanks, Barbara. I agree.
Well, there is in Christina Amadou's paper, there is she's writing about the Dadaist movement and Hugo Ball. So I'm taking the opportunity then to lead through the bridge from Dadaism to James Joyce. So with this, as I said, it's free for everyone who wants to join us, and we will just walk here. It's just a stone's throw away. So thanks a lot to all of you for coming, and thanks a lot to Emir for arranging this with us. And most of all, thanks a lot to Robert for coming to respond, and to Barbara and Christian for being here and for editing this wonderful volume. Thank you.